As you know, concern and worry about the US threat against Nigeria have continued to grow. So, in that vein, West Africa's top security risk management consulting firm, Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, has released comprehensive statistics on the killings in Nigeria and their disaggregation according to location and religious affiliation. It's an attempt to explain the real situation in this country as the uncertainty looks to be ever more prominent and stark vis-à-vis what the Tinubu administration has described as the selective narrative that led to President Trump's redesignation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern and the looming threat of military action against Nigeria. So what difference is all this likely to make? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Kabir Adamu. Good to see you, Kabir.
Same here, Charles.
Just chart for us what your latest data assessment has revealed and what you've been able to glean from it.
Thank you, Charles. So at the height of this controversy between Nigeria and the United States, we kind of noticed there was an absence of data. Yeah, there was data flying around, but most of it was coming from the United States. And then there was a lot of pushback from Nigeria. I mean, the Nigerian government concluded that that data was either faulty data or misinterpreted. And so what we did is to go into our database and attempt to come up with a disaggregation, as it were, of attacks according to locations, the 36 states of the country, plus the Federal Capital Territory. We also disaggregated those attacks on the basis of the two dominant religious affiliations in Nigeria, Christianity and Islam. Quite difficult to do for obvious reasons. Sentiments are extremely high, but I must say this before I go into the data itself. We run a team that is built on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are probably more Christians in the organization that I founded and run. And then, of course, women and Muslims, men, that balance has been. We also ISO certified, and so the principles of professionalism and as much as possible jettisoning bias, were dominant in our production.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned those things. It's quite that's important to say it.
For the simple reason that a lot of the interpretation that has come with regards to this debate between the US is extremely sentimental. So we tried to kind of put that aside. The other thing I think is that is important for me to mention is the definition of terrorism. What US considers terrorism and what Nigeria considers terrorism are very different. The Nigerian definition of terrorism is determined by the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act as amended 2022. And at the moment, it recognizes, I think, about 7 organizations that are terrorist organizations. Some of them pure terrorist groups, and then the most recent ones, I think, is the Lakurawas. So I think these are sort of backgrounds that I want to add. Now, we looked at specific attack on churches and specific attacks on mosques within a period of 5 years. And what it came to for the churches, over this period of 5 years, a total of 131 and 21 incidents.
Right. I think we've got the graphics, haven't we? Can we be seeing that? Yeah, go on. We can see that now.
So you
can refer to it because it's up on the screen.
So on the left-hand side is the bar charts representing the attacks on churches over a period of 5 years. And like I said, 121 of such attacks occurred. Now, those attacks resulted in 399 abductions and then 110 killings. These are specific attacks on churches. And then even by, just looking at the bar charts, you would see the variation. In 2021, especially abduction, which is the darker shade of green, it was extremely high. But then you could see it was reducing by 2022. It reduced a little bit. By 2023, it increased slightly. And then by 2024, you could see it plateauing at that end. And then in this year, 2025 is reducing. But then on the right-hand side is the attack on mosques. Over this period, we counted 75 incidents targeting mosques, so lower than the attacks targeting churches. And then these 75 incidents resulted in 263 abductions and 142 killings. So in the case of the attacks on mosques, the incidents were lower, but then the killings were much higher.
Right.
Also very important is the locations of these attacks. In the case of churches, most of the attacks were in the northeast of the country and some in the north central part of the country. While in the case of the mosque, they were mainly in the northwestern part of the country, specifically in Katsina and Zamfara.
Right, but the fact that the churches were located in a predominantly Muslim area, which is the northeast, does that reinforce the suggestion of some kind of targeted killing? Let me not use the word genocide.
So,
of people because of their faith.
Now, we counted about 80 different threat actors and vectors in Nigeria. Each of these 80 has specific purpose or reasons for their attack. The terrorist groups, such as the Jamaat al-Islam al-Dawati,
known to the rest of us as Boko Haram.
There were 3 of them that formed that group called Boko Haram. Now, sometimes they target on the basis of faith. They can target and attack because the person is a Christian. But that does not mean they were not also targeting Muslims, as long as they believe that those Muslims do not share the same ideology with them. So there were instances in the same northeast where they also targeted mosques and killed Muslims praying in the mosque. Point I'm trying to make is there were always reasons behind the attack and not necessarily religious reasons. And perhaps as we go into the conversation, we can talk a little bit more.
Okay, well, give us more of your stats
around
there.
So we can go to the next stat, which is showing a linear graph. I'm waiting to see if you are, so that I know which one to talk to.
Is that the one, there's a dashboard?
So this dashboard I think is probably the most important of the graph. It shows, so this is the linear graph, which here what we did is to combine the attacks on churches and mosques together. And what it shows in simple terms is that the attacks are reducing. And I think this is a credit to the government. Whatever they are doing is causing a reduction in the attack. Apart from 2024, where you saw an abduction, the bar chart for 2024 shows an increase. And specifically, it had to do with attacks in Katsina and Zamfara State, specifically targeting mosque, which is the reason for
the spike
in 2024. But in 2025, you can see the reduction. So clearly, whatever the government is doing is helping reduce.
Okay, let's see the next graphic.
Now,
what is this one?
So this one is represents incidents and occurrences in 2025 so far, from January 1st to October 31st, 2024. And it's startling, Charles, that as at the 31st of October, 9,540 Nigerians have been killed, while 7,175 Nigerians have been abducted within this period. When we disaggregated this according to the 2 religious faiths, what we came up with is for fatalities, that's the deaths, 2,831 Christians had been killed in 2025, while 6,709 Muslims had been killed in 2025. For abduction, 1,251 Christians have been abducted, while 5,924 Muslims have been abducted.
And that's probably because a lot of those killings and abductions are in areas that have large concentrations of Muslims, basically.
Now, the bar charts, or the charts below, the dark shaded ones, shows the states with the highest frequencies of fatalities. So Borno come tops, which kind of speaks to the question you just asked, followed by Zamfara, Niger, Katsina, and then Benue comes number 5. Plateau comes number 6. So I mean,
and Benue is a more Christian dominated state.
Exactly. But when you compare the number for Benue, which is 881, with that of Borno, which is 1,464, it would tell you why perhaps there were more Muslims that were killed, because Borno has 27 local governments, 22 of which are predominantly Muslims, while 5 are predominantly Christians. Most of the attacks that occurred in Borno targeted the Muslim-dominated local government, apart from Chibok, which is in southern Borno. So again, I think if we want to interrogate this bar chart that is being shown, we can see how the fatality rates are kind of fluctuating between January,
Right.
where we were 1,101, and then the peak period was in May, which was 1,298, while the last month, which we aggregated, was in October, which is 615. So again, it's a compilation of all of this that led to these figures that we presented. In simple terms, what this shows is the fact that there is no specific targeting of any faith in Nigeria. Yes,
Right.
there are groups, and I want to remind our listeners and the viewers that, like I said, there are 80 threat actors and vectors. Of course, Boko Haram is probably the most prominent one, but that does not mean Boko Haram is the only group killing. There are about 80 of such groups killing Nigerians, and I think the wake-up call.
That's a lot of people.
It's
a lot of
lot of
groups.
threat actors.
Yeah, I mean, that is scary.
Just terror groups alone. If you look at what the Constitution defines terrorism to be, there are about 7 to 8 terror groups existing in Nigeria. And so I think this for me should be perhaps the most important conversation. How do we address these 80 or so groups that exist in Nigeria and that are killing Nigerians,
Irrespective of their faith.
Exactly.
But does your data reveal what many believe is the incredible ambivalence and corruption of the government and the institutions that oversee security in this country? I'm wondering how it cuts through to the main point, which is the brutal attacks and murders as a result of that incredible ambivalence and corruption that's happening to Nigerians of all stripes. You see what I mean? Irrespective of, whether you're Christian or Muslim, because I think that's a very good point that you raise. I mean, but it doesn't make us feel any better, does it?
No, it doesn't, and I agree totally. If 9,000 persons are being killed in just 10 months.
I mean, that is astonishing.
Exactly.
That is an obscene number of people.
When I looked at the Global Peace Index, which ranks countries in terms of their how peaceful and safe they are, Nigeria sits at about 143. Now, with this number, 9,000 being killed in a year, so this is one of the graphs I wanted to talk to, and it kind of answers your question. If you look at the number of Muslims that have been killed and the number of Christians that have been killed within 5 years, if you add them up, we're looking at about 30-something thousand over this period of five years. Now, that's in no way commendable, and I think that kind of speaks to the
that's
point
a disaster
you make. The fact that on a yearly basis we have about 10,000 Nigerians being killed, it's a wake-up call to our security agencies. And for me, if Trump had come out to say stop the killings and wasn't selective in choosing just one faith, I think more Nigerians would have supported what he said. But the fact that he just narrowed it down to one faith and made it look like it was the other faith that was killing Christians, that has generated the kind of reaction that you're seeing.
Well, I mean, thank you for this, because I think what you've done is quite comprehensive. But let's turn to the diplomatic balancing act that Nigeria may be forced to play in the current circumstances if Donald Trump pushes ahead the way
and he's going to push ahead.
That he suggested that he will. If the U.S. restricts aid or cooperation, military, otherwise, what would you recommend that Nigeria do in terms of diversifying security partnerships, for instance, with Russia, China, etc., without compromising Western counter-terrorism support? Because it's not just America, it goes beyond the US.
But I mean, one of the most interesting developments of this part between the US and Nigeria is the position that the EU took. The EU was emphatic in maintaining its support for Nigeria's sovereignty and the fact that that should not be abused, which is a departure from previous times. And I guess it's a reflection of what is happening, in NATO with Ukraine. Perhaps the EU is beginning to kind of maintain its position with regards to its foreign policy imperatives. So I guess Nigeria should definitely capitalize on that. But there is a risk, and that's what we should be very mindful of. We should not turn Nigeria into a theater for proxy conflict between the West and China and Russia. There's a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a suggestion, Charles, that part of the reason why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing is because China is already fully embedded within the Nigerian state. Russia is also kind of getting a foothold. Now, whether that is true or not, what we should be looking at is the future. And I love the way you put it. How do we balance our own interest? Because, of course, in international relations, it's all about your interest.
Indeed.
How do you balance your interest vis-a-vis the interest of these other nations? And then one conversation that is ongoing at the moment is transfer of technology. If China is coming in and offering to us some form of transfer of technology, and we kind of feel that China is a better partner, how do we balance that with whatever the U.S. is planning to bring over to us? I think the U.S. has significant interest in Nigeria. There are several United States companies that are operating in Nigeria. It's building one of the biggest diplomatic representations in Nigeria. So it's telling us that it sees a future vis-a-vis its relationship with Nigeria. So we must play that balancing act, but what should be our guiding principle should be our interest. And at this moment in time, what is our interest? This presidency is pushing out the economic interest above any other interest. So how do we, and we all know Trump is transactional, how do we approach him with a sort of a basket full of offers to support our achievement of that interest? Technology is one area. I love what the Minister of Digital Communications, Digital Economy and Innovation is doing. Why don't we go to the United States with something like that? It's going to be a little bit difficult because already China has embedded technology in 5G technology in Nigeria, and I don't see the United States and China kind of working together. So those are balancing acts that we need to play.
Right. We're almost out of time. Let me just return the focus to security. Insurgency in the Northeast been going on for upwards of 16 years. It hasn't been defeated. What are the biggest gaps that you see in Nigeria's security architecture, and how can they be filled? Briefly, we've literally got 30 seconds.
Charles, accountability, accountability, accountability. If we're going to start holding the national security enterprise, 42 organizations involved in national security, accountable both financially or operationally, we're going to bring this to an end. I don't want to start picking the threat factors one after the other, but accountability is accountability. If I give you an instruction, the president has given 8 presidential directives to end the insurgency in 2025 alone. That is not acceptable, Charles. So accountability.
Okay. Thank you ever so much, and thank you for bringing those statistics and for your interpretation and your assessment. Kabir Adamu is a top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited. Good to see you.
Same
Thank
here.
you very
Thank
much
you for
indeed.
having me.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.